All right, so have you ever been, like, about to enjoy some popcorn at the movies, right?
And
And
just quiet, you're ready.
yeah.
And then bam, someone 2 rows back decides to unwrap their candy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like that crinkling sound, the one that
Uh,
makes you want to just like disappear.
the absolute
We all
worst.
have those little things, those sensory experiences that kind of like grate on us, you know?
Totally. It's fascinating how such small things, like, they really get to us.
They do. And it makes me think about folks on the autism spectrum because for them, sensory input, it's like a whole different ballgame, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's actually what we're diving into today. Well, sort of.
Hmm.
We're talking about fear, but not just any fear, a fear of zippers and how it connects to autism spectrum disorder.
Zippers, huh? I wouldn't have thought of that one. But it makes sense when you think about how sensory processing can be a major factor in ASD.
Exactly. And it shows how sensory sensitivities in ASD can be about way more than just like loud noises or bright lights, the things people usually think of.
Okay, so before we get into the whole zipper thing, can you give us a quick rundown on how sensory processing actually works differently for people with ASD?
Of course. So for some people on the spectrum, it's not simply that their senses are just, turned up or more intense. It's more like imagine a dial that's like calibrated differently.
Okay, I'm trying to picture this.
Right. What might feel like a gentle touch to you or me could feel like, I don't know, a scratchy wool sweater on bare skin to someone with ASD.
Whoa, okay, that's a very vivid image.
Yeah. Hopefully it gets the point across. And this isn't just about touch either. It can be any of the senses. Sight, sound, smell, textures, the whole 9 yards.
So it's like everything's amplified in a way.
It can be, yeah. But it's not always about amplification either. Sometimes it's more about the brain having trouble filtering out sensory information or processing it in a way that, like, makes sense to most people.
Oh, wow. That makes me think about all those times my kid has a meltdown over the tag on his shirt.
Oh, tell me about it. My niece, same thing.
Right. And I used to be like, it's just a tag, come on. But now I'm realizing it might actually be more than that for him.
I think you're onto something. And hey, speaking of tags, let's swap that out for a zipper for a second.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
Because we all know that feeling, right? When a zipper snags your shirt or you touch one of those freezing cold metal ones.
Ugh, the worst.
The worst. Now imagine you magnify that sensation by like 10. Add in the potential for sensory overload or just plain difficulty processing that visual and tactile input.
And suddenly that zipper isn't just annoying, it's like meltdown city.
Exactly.
Okay, wow, I'm starting to get the picture here. But the research we went over mentioned a few specific reasons why the zipper phobia might happen. One that I thought was really interesting was this associative learning idea.
Yes. So associative learning, it's like this. Imagine you're a young child with ASD, right? And maybe, just as an example, they get their skin pinched in a zipper or their favorite jacket breaks because of a faulty one.
Ouch, yeah, not fun.
Right. Their brain might start to create this really powerful negative association with that sensation, that sound, even just seeing a zipper.
So it's like if you're afraid of dogs because you got bitten by one as a kid, but instead of Fido, it's a zipper.
Exactly. And in fact, the material you sent, there's a really interesting case study about a little boy who developed like a full-blown phobia of zippers after one really bad pinch incident at daycare.
Wait, seriously, tell me more about that case study. What happened?
Okay, so picture this, right? Yeah, this little guy, let's say his name is Alex, and he's at daycare, he's doing his thing. He's
Yeah.
got his little backpack, and he's
Yeah.
trying to close it. And all of a sudden,
Yeah, oh no. I bet I know where this is going.
yep, his finger gets caught. And not just a little pinch. We're talking like finger turning purple, full on ouch.
Oh, that poor kid. I mean, I can only imagine how traumatic that would be at that age.
Right. And get this, from that point on, zippers were like the enemy. Backpacks, jackets, you name it. If it had a zipper, Alex wanted nothing to do with it.
Wow. So he's completely terrified of zippers now?
Pretty much. Even seeing a zipper on someone else's clothing, it was like instant anxiety attack.
That just breaks my heart, honestly. But it really shows you how just one bad experience can have such a lasting impact, especially for someone with ASD.
It really does. It really highlights the importance of understanding those triggers. Because like we were saying, it's not always about the object itself. It's about the memories and emotions we connect to it.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've talked about associative learning, but the stuff we read also mentioned how zippers look, like visually, could be a problem too. What's that all about?
Well, that's a great point. And you're right. It's not always about the way something feels, right? Like the visual aspect can be huge too. especially with ASD.
Yeah.
For
Oh,
some people on the spectrum, the way a zipper reflects light, the way those little teeth interlock and move, even the pattern, it can be a lot.
visually overwhelming.
Totally. Or even distort how they're seeing things.
You know, that actually reminds me of something I read. I think it was in one of those articles you sent. There was this young girl terrified of escalators.
Oh, yeah.
And it turned out it wasn't the escalator itself, it was that visual effect of the stairs moving. She said it made her feel like the whole world was tilting.
Exactly.
Hmm.
It all comes back to how our brains process that visual information. And just like some people are super sensitive to like fluorescent lights or certain patterns,
Right.
others might find the way the zipper looks just super distracting or even distressing.
So it's not even about zippers being scary in the way we usually think of it. It's more about how they're perceived, like both physically and visually, by someone with ASD.
You got it.
It's
And this
all-
is where we start to see the bigger picture, right? Because it's not about like banning all zippers and buttons and escalators from the world.
Yeah, that's not really an option.
No, not at all. It's about understanding that what might be a minor annoyance to one person could be a huge obstacle for someone else.
Okay, so let's talk about those obstacles for a minute. What can you actually do if you're like dealing with this kind of sensory overload, whether it's zippers or something else entirely?
Right. Well, the first thing, and honestly, this is important for anyone, is just recognizing and validating those sensory experiences.
Validating them.
Yeah, because a lot of times people with ASD are told to just get over it or they're being too sensitive.
Yeah.
But we have to remember, it's not about being difficult. It's literally a different way of experiencing the world.
That's a really good point. So instead of dismissing how they feel, we need to like meet them where they are and find ways to support them.
Exactly. And luckily, there are a lot of great strategies out there.
Yeah.
One thing we see a lot, and it came up in the research you sent too, is sensory accommodations. Like with clothing, just opting for buttons or snaps instead of zippers can make a world of difference.
Right. Like that seems like such a simple change, but I bet for someone who really struggles with zippers, that could be huge.
Oh, totally. And it doesn't always mean avoiding the trigger completely either. Sometimes it's more about giving them tools to cope. Like those triggers are just unavoidable in everyday life.
Okay, that makes sense. What are some of those tools? I know a lot of people find weighted blankets helpful.
Yeah, weighted blankets are great, especially for people who crave that deep pressure. It can be really calming.
For sure.
And in the stuff you sent, they talked about noise-canceling headphones, which can be amazing for some folks, and even just like fidget toys.
Oh, yeah. My kid loves his fidget toys. Those are like a lifeline sometimes.
Right. It's all about finding what works for each person.
Yeah.
But then there are also more like long-term solutions, right? Like therapies. I know CBT can be helpful for some
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, for sure. CBT, so for people who aren't familiar, that's cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right. And one technique they use, it's called graded exposure. Have you heard of
I
that?
have, yeah. But just in case someone listening hasn't, can you kind of break it down for us?
Of course. So basically, you gradually and safely, like in a really controlled way, expose the person to the thing they're afraid of, but in a way that they can handle.
So like with the zipper phobia, would it be like starting with just, I don't know, pictures of zippers and then maybe working up to like touching one?
Exactly. So you might start with pictures, then move on to like touching a zipper that's not attached to anything. Then maybe a jacket with the zipper open.
And eventually they can like work their way up to being okay with a zipper on their own clothes or whatever it is.
Exactly. And the key is, while you're doing this gradual exposure, you're also teaching them coping mechanisms, like breathing exercises or positive self-talk to help them manage that anxiety.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I imagine having a good support system is crucial too, right? Like just knowing you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. Having people who understand, whether it's family, friends, online support groups, whatever,
Even just one person, right?
even it's one person, someone who gets it, who doesn't judge, it makes all the difference.
Yeah. It really does. You know, this whole conversation has honestly got me thinking about my own relationship with sensory input.
Really?
Yeah, I've never thought of myself as like super sensitive or anything. But now I'm wondering, maybe I've just gotten really good at like masking it over the years.
That's a really interesting thought. And it just goes to show you, we're all on a spectrum when it comes to this stuff.
That's a good way to put it.
There's no normal or abnormal. It's just about finding what works for you.
I love that. So as we're wrapping up here, if there's someone out there listening who's like, wow, this really hit home for me, what would you say to them?
Don't be afraid to reach out. There's so much information out there, so much support, whether it's online, in your community, or talking to a professional. You're not alone. And understanding yourself better, it can make a world of difference.
So well said. Knowledge is power, right?
It really is.
And sometimes you just need to have a little curiosity, dig a little deeper, and you might discover a whole new way of seeing yourself and the world around you.
Could agree more.
This was great. Thanks for diving into this with me.
Anytime, I always learn something new with these deep dives.